6 miles per hour. I, on the other hand, was currently managing a solid 1.5 items, weighed 260 pounds, 80 of which were steel, and sounded like a medieval kitchen falling down a flight of stairs. It was 5:15 a.m., pitch black save for the glow of streetlights, and the only sound was a persistent rhythmic clank, squeak, clank, squeak, echoing off the pristine beige houses of Maple Creek. Why? Because my neighbor, Brenda, had a problem with my shoes. Let's rewind a bit. Before the clanking, before the squeak, before the distinct smell of sweat and polished steel, there was just Mike. That's me. A graphic designer in my late 20s, working from home, which, let me tell you, is both a blessing and a curse. Blessing. Pajamas are always acceptable work attire. Curse. The line between productive professional and pajama-clad hermit blurs dangerously fast. My solution? The 5 a.m. jog. It wasn't about PBs or crushing calories. It was about escaping the 4 walls of my home office, breathing some actual air, and experiencing a brief moment of pre-dawn peace. Most people think of morning jogs as a time for self-improvement. For me, it was self-preservation. It was the only time the world was quiet, the only time I could think without the intrusive pings of client emails or the existential dread of my own increasingly messy living room. My route was always the same. Down Oak Street, a quick right on Elm, a loop around Maple Avenue, and back home. It was a modest 2-mile circuit, just enough to feel like I'd accomplished something before the sun even considered making an appearance. My shoes, a perfectly respectable pair of New Balance running trainers, had seen better days, but they did the job. Their soles made a gentle, rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack against the sidewalk, a sound I found almost meditative. Little did I know, it was a sound that would spark a war. Maple Creek itself was a testament to suburban conformity. Picture a freshly ironed brochure for an idyllic life. Every house was a variation on a beige theme. Lawns were chemically manicured to an unnatural emerald green, and the HOA rules were thicker than a Dickens novel, detailing everything from acceptable mailbox designs to the precise shade of off-white you were allowed to paint your trim. It was the kind of place where conformity wasn't just encouraged, it was enforced with the zealous fervor of a forgotten medieval guild. And at the heart of this meticulously maintained ecosystem was Brenda. Brenda, whose full name I rarely heard because everyone just called her Brenda. She lived 2 houses down from me, a single-story ranch with an immaculately trimmed rose bush that always seemed to be judging my slightly overgrown hedges. Brenda was, for lack of a better term, the self-appointed guardian of Maple Creek's pristine order. In her mid-50s, with a permanent scowl etched between her perfectly tweezed eyebrows, she had the uncanny ability to detect any deviation from HOA regulations within a 5-block radius. Brenda was the one who measured your lawn with a ruler, just to make sure it wasn't a millimeter over the approved height. She'd send passive-aggressive emails about unapproved holiday decorations in January, even if said decoration was a lone, forgotten string of fairy lights on a porch railing. Her face was permanently fixed in a "I'd like to speak to the manager of this entire subdivision" scowl. I'd had run-ins with Brenda before, of course. Who hadn't? There was the time she sent me a certified letter about my recycling bin being too close to the curb by 3 inches, citing some obscure bylaw about impeding the free flow of non-motorized pedestrian traffic. Then there was the incident of the rogue dandelion, a defiant yellow beacon in my otherwise acceptable lawn, which she photographed and submitted to the HOA board with a formal complaint titled "Unsightly Flora Infestation." My life in Maple Creek had, up until this point, been a careful dance around Brenda's exacting standards. I kept my lawn mowed, my recycling bin properly distanced, and my dandelions. Well, let's just say I got very good at covert weeding. But nothing, not the recycling bin, not the dandelion, not even the time she complained my garden gnome looked too menacing, could have prepared me for the sheer audacity of her next complaint. A complaint so petty, so utterly absurd, that it would ultimately redefine my understanding of neighborly relations and propel me into a new, heavily armored chapter of my life. The era of the jogging night was about to begin, all because of my shoes, and a woman named Brenda. It was a perfectly unremarkable Tuesday morning. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew-kissed grass, and somewhere in the distance, a freshly brewed pot of coffee. My headphones were in, a gentle indie playlist humming in my ears, providing the perfect soundtrack to my solitary journey. The thwack, thwack, thwack of my New Balances was a familiar rhythm, a comforting counterpoint to the quiet hum of the streetlights. I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do, minding my own damn business. As I approached Brenda's house, I felt the usual flicker of mild apprehension. Her property was, as always, meticulously maintained. Not a blade of grass out of place, not a single rogue leaf on her porch. I usually tried to pick up my pace slightly when passing her place, a subconscious effort to minimize my presence, to become a fleeting, unnoticeable blur. But on this particular morning, fate, or perhaps just Brenda's hypersensitive hearing, had other plans. Just as I was directly in front of her perfectly trimmed rose bushes, the harsh glare of her front porch light snapped on. It was like a spotlight hitting me, freezing me in mid-stride. I instinctively pulled one earbud out, the indie music fading to a distant whisper. Brenda was standing on, her porch, silhouetted against the bright light, a pink silk bathrobe wrapped tightly around her, looking like a suburban banshee. In her arms, a small, trembling dog with beady eyes yapped weakly, as if pre-programmed to amplify her indignation. "Excuse me! Excuse me!" Her voice, even at 5:10 a.m., carried with surprising volume, cutting through the pre-dawn stillness like a rusty saw. I stopped, bracing myself. This was never good. "Morning, Brenda," I said, trying to inject some cheerfulness into my voice, a futile attempt to diffuse whatever was coming. "Everything okay?" "No, it is not okay, Mr. Johnson," she declared, her voice rising in pitch. She had this way of elongating my surname, turning it into an accusation. "You are being incredibly disruptive." I blinked. Disruptive? "Brenda, it's 5:10 a.m. I'm jogging." I gestured vaguely at my running attire, my shoes, the general context of being a person exercising on a public sidewalk. "It's the noise!" she practically shrieked, clutching Sir Reginald, that was the dog's ridiculous name, closer to her chest. Sir Reginald responded with another tiny, pathetic yip. "That incessant slapping! Your feet! On the pavement! It's vibrating my windows! It woke up Sir Reginald!" My internal monologue went into overdrive. Slapping? Vibrating her windows? Sir Reginald? Is she for real? I had never in my life considered my footsteps to be slapping. They were just footsteps. The sound of rubber meeting asphalt. The most innocuous sound a human could make while moving. "Brenda," I started, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm just running. I'm on a public sidewalk. I'm not playing loud music. I'm not yelling. It's just my shoes." "It is unacceptable," she insisted, taking a step down from her porch, invading my personal space with the force of her indignation. "I am a light sleeper, and your stomping is simply unacceptable. It's a repetitive auditory disturbance. You need to jog later, or find a different route, or get quieter shoes." I stood there, dumbfounded. Quieter shoes? Does she want me to jog in bedroom slippers? Levitate? Should I attach mufflers to my feet? Am I supposed to silently glide down the street like some kind of ninja mime? The absurdity of it all was breathtaking. I tried to reason with her again, a foolish endeavor I knew even as the words left my mouth. "Brenda, I don't know what to tell you. These are normal running shoes. I'm literally just jogging." "Normal isn't good enough, Mr. Johnson. This is Maple Creek. We have standards. Your slapping is disturbing the peace and quiet of my home and my highly sensitive emotional support animal." Sir Reginald, as if on cue, let out a tiny, high-pitched whimper. I took a deep breath, trying to summon the last vestiges of my morning calm. "Look, I'm sorry if my existence offends you, but I have a right to exercise on public property." I started to turn, hoping to just walk away and finish my run, to escape the pink-robed fury before it consumed me entirely. But Brenda wasn't done. She took another step, her voice sharpening into a threat. "I will be reporting this to the HOA, Mr. Johnson, and if necessary, the police, for a noise disturbance. You mark my words." I just kept walking, the thwack, thwack, thwack of my slapping shoes now sounding, to my own ears, like an act of defiant rebellion. My blood was boiling. I wasn't just annoyed. I was genuinely furious. My quiet morning sanctuary had been invaded, my simple routine declared a public nuisance, all because a woman with too much time on her hands and an apparently superhuman sense of hearing couldn't tolerate the sound of human movement. As I finished my run, the anger simmered. Quieter shoes? Later jogs? A different route? No, absolutely not. This was my route, my time, my simple pleasure. And Brenda had just declared war on it. Little did she know, I was about to arm myself for battle. The aftermath of the slapping shoes incident left me in a state of simmering rage. I tried to be the bigger person. I really did. I vented to my buddy, Dave, over a couple of IPAs that evening. Dave, who works in IT and has a similarly sarcastic worldview, listened intently, his eyes widening with each absurd detail. "Dude," he said, taking a long swig of his beer. "She's completely unhinged. Vibrating my windows? Is she living in a cardboard box? And Sir Reginald? I swear that dog just exists to be perpetually inconvenienced." "I know, right?" I fumed. "And the worst part is I actually tried to comply. You know, to be reasonable." And I had. The very next day, a full 24 hours after the confrontation, I found myself in a sporting goods store, staring at a wall of running shoes. "I need something silent," I told the bewildered sales assistant. "Like ninja-level silent. So quiet you wouldn't even know I was there." He looked at me like I'd just asked for a pair of shoes that could also make me invisible. I ended up with a pair of ridiculously expensive cloud foam runners, boasting revolutionary sound-dampening technology. They felt like running on actual marshmallows. My first run in the new shoes was a revelation. They were quieter. The thwack, thwack, thwack was replaced with a muffled puff, puff, puff. I felt like a stealth bomber, gliding silently through the pre-dawn gloom. I even gave a little triumphant nod as I passed Brenda's house, confident that my marshmallow-souled compliance had won the day. I was wrong. So wrong. 2 days later, an official-looking email landed in my inbox. Subject: HOA violation notice. Repetitive auditory disturbances. It was from the Maple Creek HOA, CCing Brenda, naturally. The email detailed multiple complaints regarding excessive and repetitive percussive noises originating from Mr. Johnson's person during pre-dawn hours, disturbing the peace and tranquility of the neighborhood. There was even a vague mention of potential legal action if the nuisance continued. My blood ran cold. The cloud shoes had failed. Brenda was incorrigible. I called Dave again, practically hyperventilating. "She's doing it, man! She's actually escalating! I bought the damn quiet shoes!" Dave was quiet for a moment. "Okay, so the rational approach is out. We're beyond reason here, Mike. She doesn't want you to be quiet. She just doesn't want you to be you." "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice edged with desperation. "Jog later? Fine, but I like 5 a.m. Different route? This is my neighborhood. I'm not going to be driven out of my own damn street by a woman with a noise fetish and a yappy dog." All right. Calm down," Dave said. "Let's brainstorm. She said your footsteps were too loud. Not your music, not your breathing. Your feet. How do you muffle your feet?" We threw around increasingly absurd ideas. Jogging on stilts, hovercraft shoes, attaching tiny pillows to my soles. Nothing quite hit the mark. Then Dave, ever the provocateur, leaned into the mic on our Discord call, a mischievous glint in his eye even through the webcam. "You know, you should go the other way. Be so loud she can't find the footstep noise. Overwhelm her. Get a drum line. Juggle chainsaws. Jog in a full suit of armor." He said it as a joke. Pure, unadulterated sarcasm. But for me, in that moment, something clicked. A long, dangerous pause stretched between us. My mind was racing. A drum line? Impractical. Chainsaws? Definitely illegal. But a suit of armor? "Dave," I said slowly, the words forming in my mind with an almost poetic clarity. "You're a genius." Dave chuckled, clearly thinking I was just playing along. Yeah, get some plate mail. A big ol' sword, a shield with your family crest. You could be Sir Mike, Knight of the Pavement." I was already typing. My browser history was about to take a hard left turn from best client portfolio examples to medieval combat gear for sale. I spent the next 3 hours deep down the rabbit hole of the internet. Renaissance Fair armor, SCA combat armor, used medieval armor. Buy full suit of plate mail online. Turns out, there's a surprisingly robust market for replica armor. Most of it is for display, or for historical reenactment groups, like the Society for Creative Anachronism, or SCA, which I learned all about. I found everything from flimsy plastic cosplay pieces to historically accurate, hand-forged steel. My budget was screaming, but my sense of righteous indignation was shouting louder. And then I saw it. On eBay. A Gothic plate armor replica. Not a cheap prop, but a serious, fully articulated suit of steel, described as parade grade, suitable for light sparring or display. It looked magnificent, impressive, intimidating. And crucially, it looked loud. Very, very loud. It was $1,200. My finger hovered over the Buy It Now button. I looked at the HOA violation email again, still open on my other monitor. Repetitive, auditory disturbances. My mouth twisted into a grim smile. I clicked Buy It Now. Sir Mike, Knight of the Pavement, I muttered to myself, a dangerous glint in my eye. Reporting for duty. But my newfound spirit of malicious compliance wasn't limited to just my morning jogs. While in this mood, my gaze drifted to the back corner of my yard, the dreaded property line, where my slightly dilapidated fence met Brenda's perfectly manicured garden. I'd been meaning to replace the fence for ages, and a new tool shed was on my wish list. Brenda, I knew, valued her views and her unobstructed sightlines. I pulled out my phone. "Yeah," I said to the number for Apex Contractors that I'd saved from a flyer. "I want a 6-foot privacy fence. Cedar. The good stuff. And the biggest shed you can legally build, right on the property line. The legal side of the property line, of course." The war, it seemed, was escalating beyond just my footsteps. A week and a half later, a delivery truck, looking far too large for our suburban street, rumbled to a stop in front of my house. The driver, a burly man with a perpetually surprised expression, wrestled a massive coffin-sized wooden crate off the back. It was adorned with fragile stickers, which seemed utterly redundant given its contents. Getting the crate inside was an adventure in itself, involving a hand truck, a lot of grunting, and me almost taking out my front door frame. Once it was in my living room, the sheer scale of the thing hit me. It wasn't just a costume. It was a sculpture of impending metallic doom. Assembling it was a hilarious dialogue-free scene of pure slapstick. The instructions were in what I could only describe as ancient Teutonic IKEA. I managed to nearly decapitate myself with the visor of the helmet, a sallet I learned after some frantic Googling. Attaching the gauntlets was like trying to put oven mitts on a very angry octopus. The breastplate alone felt like it weighed more than I did. It took me an hour, sweating profusely and muttering curses under my breath, to get the full suit on. I stood there, a gleaming, slightly off-kilter sentinel in my living room. I tried to walk. The sound was glorious. Clank, squeak, grind, shree. It was a symphony of metallic chaos, a discordant orchestra of my very own. Each step was a deliberate, monumental effort. I managed to shuffle over to the full-length mirror, my reflection a knight straight out of a poorly choreographed B-movie. My internal monologue, usually so witty, was replaced with a single, triumphant thought. Brenda is going to lose her ever-loving mind. The next morning, at precisely 5:00 a.m., the dawn of the clanking night began. I waddled out the front door, the metal groaning and squeaking with every movement. The air was cool, but inside the armor, I was already a sauna. My jog was less a jog, and more a pained, rhythmic shuffle, a slow-motion metallic march. Each clank resonated, each squeak pierced, the pre-dawn stillness. I felt ridiculous, hot, and perversely, incredibly powerful. The neighborhood, usually slumbering in blissful ignorance of my solitary ritual, began to stir. As I made my way down Oak Street, a light flicked on in Mrs. Henderson's house. Her elderly poodle, usually a quiet observer, started howling, convinced a Terminator had arrived to collect overdue library books. A newspaper delivery guy, mid-toss, nearly swerved his car into a lamppost, gawking at the sight of a full medieval knight trundling down a suburban street at dawn. It was magnificent. My main objective, however, was just 2 houses down. Brenda's fortress of quietude. I reached her property line, the sound of my armor amplifying in the stillness. I made a point to do 3 slow, deliberate, incredibly loud, clanking laps directly in front of her perfectly manicured lawn. Clank, squeak, grind, clank, squeak, grind. Each pass was a declaration. each metallic groan a war cry. Then, just as I was contemplating a fourth lap, the front door of Brenda's house flew open. Like a bat out of hell, or perhaps a sleep-deprived suburban ghoul, Brenda emerged. She was, predictably, in her pink silk bathrobe, her hair a wild tangle, her face a masterpiece of rapidly shifting emotions. It went from sleepy confusion to wide-eyed disbelief to incandescent rage in a matter of seconds. Sir Reginald, clutched in her arms, let out a terrified yelp, far more convincing than his usual performative whimpers. "What, in the name of God, are you doing?" she shrieked, her voice cracking with a mixture of shock and fury. I stopped, the sudden silence after my metallic symphony feeling almost deafening. Slowly, deliberately, I reached up and lifted the visor of my helmet with a dramatic squeak. My face, already flushed from the exertion and the heat of the armor, was probably a deep shade of crimson, but I hoped it conveyed a serene, almost triumphant smugness. "Morning, Brenda," I chirped, my voice muffled by the helmet but still carrying a distinct cheer. "Great news! You said my footsteps were too loud, right?" Her jaw worked, unable to form words for a moment. Her eyes, wide and disbelieving, darted over my gleaming armor, her brain clearly struggling to process the scene unfolding before her. You're clanking!" "Exactly," I said, spreading my gauntleted hands in a gesture of magnanimous explanation. "You can't hear my footsteps at all. All you can hear is the armor. Problem solved. I'm being perfectly considerate, just like you asked. No more slapping noises." I even gave a little triumphant nod, which caused my helmet to list precariously to one side. Brenda's face twisted into an expression of pure, unadulterated outrage. "This is harassment! This is ridiculous! You're insane! I'm calling the police! You can't just jog in armor!" "You have a good morning, Brenda," I said, offering a mock salute with my gauntlet, the metal scraping audibly. Then, with a theatrical clank, squeak, clank, I turned and slowly, ponderously, trundled away down the street, leaving a thoroughly shell-shocked Brenda sputtering on her porch. The first victory was mine. The quiet, peaceful sanctuary of my morning jog was back, albeit with a significantly higher metallic content. And Brenda, for the first time in our long and fraught history, was utterly speechless. This, I realized, was going to be an excellent day. The armor jogs quickly became a regular feature of Maple Creek mornings. I was on my third one, a week after the initial confrontation, slowly making my way down Elm Street. I was getting used to the weight, the heat, and the sheer performance art of it all. My internal thermostat was recalibrating, and my muscles, previously accustomed to minimalist running, were now developing a surprising amount of fortitude. The sound, the glorious, undeniable sound, was becoming a part of the neighborhood's auditory landscape. Most people had adapted, waving or giving me a bewildered thumbs up. Kids loved it, of course, pointing and yelling, "Look, a knight!" Then, as I passed the local elementary school, a patrol car pulled up slowly alongside me. Its blue and red lights weren't flashing, but the message was clear. They rolled down the window. "Sir, can you please stop clanking for a second?" a weary voice requested. I dutifully stopped. The sudden silence was indeed deafening, highlighting the subtle creaks and groans of my armor as I stood motionless. Two officers got out. One was a rookie, fresh-faced and visibly trying to suppress a giggle. The other was a veteran, grizzled and looking like he hadn't slept since 1998, his expression a masterpiece of, "I've seen it all, and this is still pretty weird." "Problem, officers?" I asked, my voice slightly tinny inside the helmet. The rookie cop cleared his throat. We, we got a call about a knight harassing a neighbor, disrupting the peace. He glanced at his partner, who just sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Oh, you mean Brenda?" I said, lifting my visor. My face was probably still bright red from the heat. "No harassment here, officer. I'm just jogging. Is it illegal to wear this?" I gestured to my gleaming plate mail. The veteran cop finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. "Sir, it's 5:30 in the morning." "And I'm just getting my cardio," I replied, trying to sound as earnest as possible. "Look, officer, my neighbor complained my shoes were a noise disturbance. She said they slapped and vibrated her windows. So I got quieter shoes. That didn't work. She kept complaining. So I bought this. Now she can't hear my footsteps at all. Just the armor. I'm being considerate, in my own way. I'm not on her property. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just a guy in 80 pounds of steel trying to lower his cholesterol." The rookie cop looked like he was about to burst. The veteran cop, however, was studying me, his expression slowly shifting from annoyance to a grudging, weary amusement. He knew a legitimate, if absurd, loophole when he saw one. He glanced over at Brenda's house. Her curtains, naturally, were pulled back slightly, and I could just make out her furious silhouette. "Sir," the veteran said, a slight tremor of suppressed laughter in his voice, "we can't really do anything here. You're not breaking any laws. There's no noise ordinance violation for intermittent clanking, especially not this early. It's not continuous, like a party. It's just you." He paused, then added, "Ma'am, on the other hand, keeps calling 911 for non-emergencies. That's a different story." He gave me a knowing look. "Try to keep it to the sidewalks, all right?" "Will do, officer," I said, giving another mock salute with my gauntlet. The officers turned and headed back to their patrol car. As they drove away, I saw the rookie finally lose it, his shoulders shaking with silent laughter. The veteran just shook his head, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. Brenda, I could tell, was seething behind her curtain. Another point for the night. Later that day, the second phase of my plan began. A massive pickup truck emblazoned with "Apex Contractors, your project, our priority," pulled up to my house, followed by another truck hauling a trailer laden with cedar lumber, tools, and a small excavator. Out jumped a crew of 3 burly guys, led by a man named Sal. Sal was a no-nonsense type, with a thick mustache and a confident swagger that suggested he could build a small nation if you gave him enough plywood. "Mike Johnson?" Sal asked, extending a calloused hand. "That's me. Ready to build some privacy?" "You bet your ass," Sal grinned. "Got the permits, drawings, everything. 6-foot cedar fence running right along that property line, and a 10x12 shed, just like you asked. Best quality cedar money can buy, by the way. Your neighbor's gonna love it." He winked. No sooner had Sal finished speaking than Brenda stormed out of her house, a fresh wave of outrage radiating from her. She looked even more disheveled than she had during our armor confrontation. "You can't build that!" she screeched, pointing a trembling finger at the stack of lumber. "That's going to block my son! It's an eyesore! Where are your permits?" Sal didn't even flinch. He slowly pulled a clipboard from under his arm, unfurled a rolled-up set of blueprints, and pointed to a stamped seal. "Got 'em right here, ma'am. City approved. Zoned for a 15-foot structure. This one's 14. We're 6 inches inside Mr. Johnson's property line, just like the law says." He spoke with the calm authority of a man who dealt with enraged neighbors on a daily basis. I walked out of my house, carrying a tray with 4 steaming cups of coffee. "Hey Sal, crew, got some coffee for you." "Oh, hi Brenda. Isn't it a great day for home improvement?" I offered her a smile that was probably a little too sweet. Brenda's eyes darted from the stack of lumber to the permits in Sal's hand, to the spot where Sal's crew was already marking out the shed foundation. The realization dawned on her. This wasn't just about my jogs. This was a two-front war, and I was clearly investing heavily in both campaigns. Her face, already a patchwork of indignation, tightened further. She let out a frustrated huff, spun on her heel, and marched back into her house, slamming the door with a satisfying thud. Sal chuckled, accepting a coffee. "She's a feisty one, huh?" "You have no idea," I replied. "All right, boys, let's get building." As the rhythmic thud of hammers and the buzz of power saws filled the air, replacing my clanking, I knew Brenda was watching. She couldn't complain about the noise of construction, not legally, and she couldn't complain about the fence or the shed. I was meticulously adhering to every rule, every regulation, every letter of the law. This wasn't just about getting back at her. It was about reclaiming my peace, one meticulously planned, perfectly legal, and deeply annoying act at a time. The battle was far from over, but the tides, I felt, were turning. The email arrived on a Friday afternoon, stark and ominous. Urgent. Emergency HOA meeting. Violation review. It detailed the agenda. Review of numerous complaints regarding Mr. Michael Johnson, including but not limited to creating a public nuisance, harassment, unapproved exterior structures, and disturbing the peace. It was clearly Brenda's final, desperate attempt to bring me down. She had called in the big guns, the entire HOA board, and by extension, the entire neighborhood. The meeting was held in the beige clubhouse, a place usually reserved for dull potlucks and even duller discussions about shrubbery. Tonight, however, it buzzed with an unusual energy. Every seat was taken. Curious neighbors, many of whom had witnessed my armored escapades or the ongoing construction, leaned forward, eager for the drama. Brenda sat in the front row, rigid and severe, flanked by her husband, a meek man who rarely spoke, and of course Sir Reginald, nestled in a Gucci dog carrier. She clutched a stack of papers, presumably her evidence. The HOA president, a perpetually stressed-looking woman named Carol, cleared her throat. "All right, everyone. Thank you for attending this unscheduled meeting. We have a significant matter to discuss regarding recent, shall we say, unusual activities within Maple Creek." She shot a nervous glance in my direction. I sat near the back, trying to appear nonchalant, as if I hadn't single-handedly plunged the neighborhood into a bizarre medieval suburban conflict. Brenda didn't wait for an invitation. She practically leaped to her feet, her voice trembling with indignation. "This is beyond unusual, Carol. This is an outrage. Mr. Johnson," she jabbed a finger in my general direction, "has taken it upon himself to terrorize this community. First, his incessant slapping footfalls, then," she gestured wildly, "he starts jogging in a full suit of armor at all hours of the morning. The noise is unbearable. My windows vibrate. Sir Reginald is a nervous wreck." She held up the tiny dog, who looked less like a nervous wreck and more like he was enjoying the attention. She continued, escalating into a full-on meltdown. And then, as if that weren't enough, he's having a monstrosity of a fence and a shed built, right on our shared property line. It blocks my sun. It's an eyesore. It's an unapproved exterior structure. He is clearly violating every single bylaw regarding noise, aesthetic harmony, and neighborly conduct. She slammed her stack of papers onto the table. A dramatic flourish. "I demand he be fined. I demand he cease these disruptive activities. I demand he remove that metal costume and those awful structures." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Brenda had clearly practiced this speech. Carol finally managed to interject. "Thank you, Brenda. Mr. Johnson, do you have anything to say in your defense?" I stood up slowly, trying to project an air of calm reasonableness, despite the righteous anger simmering within me. I'd come prepared. I clutched a printout of the HOA bylaws, highlighted and annotated. "Look, everyone," I began, my voice clear and even. "I just want to be left alone. Brenda complained about my footsteps, so I bought quieter shoes. She still complained. So I found a solution that technically eliminates the sound of my footsteps entirely. The police, as some of you might know, have already visited me. They confirmed I'm not breaking any laws. It's not a noise ordinance violation. The armor is unconventional, I admit. But it's not illegal. It's not hurting anyone." "It's disturbing the peace!" Brenda shrieked. "The peace of your house, Brenda," I retorted without raising my voice. "Not the peace of the neighborhood, as confirmed by law enforcement." Then a surprising voice broke through. Old Mr. Henderson, a retired history professor who lived 2 doors down from Brenda, slowly rose. "Brenda," he said, his voice surprisingly firm, "you told me my heirloom tomatoes were too red last year. Said they clashed with your petunias." A few chuckles broke out. Another neighbor, a young woman named Sarah, spoke up. She reported my kid's portable basketball hoop as an aggressive structure that promoted unruly behavior. Suddenly, the dam broke. Neighbors started sharing their own Brenda stories. The lawn gnomes, the bird feeder placement, the unauthorized shade of blue on a front door. It became clear that Brenda wasn't just targeting me. She was a one-woman HOA enforcement squad, making everyone's life slightly more miserable. The sympathy for her rapidly evaporated. Just then, the double doors of the clubhouse opened, and Sal, the contractor, fresh from a day of fence building, walked in, a roll of blueprints tucked under his arm. I'd asked him to come, just in case. He nodded at me, a silent gesture of support. Brenda, seeing him, sputtered, "And him! He's building illegal structures!" Sal just walked to the front of the room, unfurled the blueprints, and laid them on the table in front of the HOA board. "My crew and I checked every single code, ma'am," he said, his voice calm and authoritative. "The fence is 6 feet high, exactly on the property line, within city limits. The shed is 10x12, within the maximum allowable square footage for a detached accessory structure. We have all the permits, signed and sealed by the city inspectors. They already signed off on the foundation." He pointed to various stamps on the blueprints. "Everything is 100% legal. Mr. Johnson is well within his rights as a homeowner." Brenda's face went from crimson to a sickly shade of white. Her carefully constructed case was crumbling around her. She had no legal ground, no HOA bylaw to stand on. The armor was legal, the fence was legal, the shed was legal. My harassment was merely me existing within my rights. Carol, the HOA president, looked at the board members. There was a brief, whispered discussion. Then she looked at Brenda, her expression a mix of pity and exasperation. "Brenda," she said, "while we appreciate your vigilance, and we understand your concerns regarding noise and aesthetics, Mr. Johnson has not violated any existing HOA bylaws or city ordinances. The police have confirmed the noise is not actionable, and the construction is fully permitted. Therefore, we have no grounds to issue any fines or demands." She turned to the rest of the board. "All those in favor of dismissing Brenda's complaints against Mr. Johnson?" 4 hands shot up immediately. One board member, a nervous man named Gary, hesitated for a second, then sheepishly raised his hand. Brenda's husband looked at her, then quickly looked away, not daring to vote against her. The vote was 4-1. Brenda stood there, defeated. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She sputtered, her voice barely a whisper. This is anarchy!" Then, with a final, furious glare at me, she snatched up Sir Reginald, grabbed her husband by the arm, and stormed out of the clubhouse, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Then, slowly, a few claps started. Then more. Soon, the entire room erupted in quiet, relieved applause. I gave a small, grateful nod to Sal, who just winked. The battle of the beige clubhouse was over, and the night had won. In the days that followed the great clubhouse showdown, a strange sense of peace settled over Maple Creek. The contractors from Apex finished the fence and the shed with remarkable speed. The cedar fence, a beautiful, towering structure, now provided perfect privacy for my backyard. It was exactly 6 feet high, perfectly stained, and, crucially, it entirely blocked Brenda's previously unobstructed view of the street from her kitchen window. The shed, a robust 10x12 structure, looked more like a miniature cabin than a mere storage unit. It, too, was perfectly placed, a legal, imposing, and completely unavoidable addition to the neighborhood landscape. Both were, of course, perfectly within code. Brenda's response was predictable. Her curtains remained drawn most of the day, and if I ever saw her outside, she was either meticulously pruning her rose bushes with a furious intensity or speed-walking to her car, avoiding eye contact at all costs. Sir Reginald remained conspicuously absent from her arms. One crisp morning, I went for one last armor jog. It felt like a victory lap. The metal clanged and squeaked, perhaps even louder than usual, a final symphony of triumph. As I made my way past Brenda's house, I slowed my pace, savoring the moment. Her curtains were drawn tight, a defiant but ultimately futile gesture of retreat. She didn't come out. She didn't scream. There was just the resounding silence of her defeat. It was the most satisfying jog of my life. Later that week, Sal the contractor stopped by to pick up the final check. He stood admiring the finished fence and shed, a look of genuine pride on his face. "You're a legend, man," he said, taking the check. "My wife thinks you're a hero. Everyone in the crew does. That armor thing? Chef's kiss. We were talking about it for days. Best project we've worked on all year, just for the drama." He chuckled. "You ever need anything else built, you call me. Maybe a drawbridge for that fence?" He winked. "I'll keep that in mind, Sal," I said, a genuine smile on my face. "Thanks again for everything. You guys did a fantastic job." After Sal left, I carefully cleaned my armor, polishing away the minor scuffs and marks. It was a beautiful piece, a symbol of defiance and stubbornness. I couldn't just store it in a box. It deserved a place of honor. So I painstakingly assembled a sturdy wooden stand, and there, in the center of my brand-new, perfectly legal, and undeniably imposing shed, I mounted the Gothic plate armor replica. It stood guard, a silent, gleaming sentinel, the ultimate trophy of a ridiculous war. The final scene, a week later. It was 5:00 a.m. The air was cool, the streetlights cast long shadows. I laced up my old New Balances, the ones that had started this whole saga. I stepped out my front door and began my jog. The thwack, thwack, thwack of my shoes on the pavement sounded louder and sweeter than ever. It was the sound of normalcy, of peace, of a morning reclaimed. As I passed Brenda's house, I noticed something new. A for sale sign, discreetly placed but undeniably there, nestled among her perfectly trimmed rose bushes. Brenda's beige bungalow, Charming, tranquil, and HOA approved, I imagined the listing would read. I just smiled, a wide, genuine smile, and kept on running. My pace was steady, my breathing even. The neighborhood was finally, truly quiet. And if the new neighbors ever complained about my early morning routine, well, I just kept Sal's number. I hear he's great with moats.